So we said we would run through the tape, and I think we've been going in a full sprint. This has been quite an eventful final week for this administration, making good on the president's commitment to use every minute, every day of every week that we had to get results. When I came down here on my first full day in office, back when I had a little bit less gray hair, as my daughter likes to point out, I spoke about how the work that we do to keep the American people and the world informed through you, with you, could not be more important. Most of us have traveled well more than 1 million miles now together. We've done it with a remarkable press corps, people that I've gotten to know as colleagues. If I said friends, that might actually create problems for you, but let me simply say how much I appreciate the partnership, the professionalism, the work that we've done. I have even greater respect, even greater appreciation for you asking the tough questions, for you holding us to account, being on the receiving end. Sometimes that's not always the most comfortable thing, not always the most enjoyable thing, but it is the most necessary thing in our democracy.
Reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal?
I'm happy to address questions.
We had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing.
I'm happy to address questions when we get a chance. Thank you.
Did you want to finish? Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you?
I'm happy to address your questions when we get to questions. Thank you. Thank you.
You helped destroy our religion Judaism by associating.
Yeah, I have a statement. Yeah, I have a statement to make. Thank you.
You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascists.
I look forward to taking questions when I get a chance to finish my statement. Thank you.
Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through the genocide.
Thank you. And thank you, Matt. Now, I've got a few more things to say, and then I'm happy to take any question about anything, as we've done these past 4 years. And indeed, I'll talk a little bit about the developments the last few days as well. But I first really wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you. And also thank you to, well, okay, there's an asterisk, and yes, thank you, Matt Lee. But also to a remarkable press team here led by Matt Miller, who do the work every day of trying to make sure that you're informed, the American people are informed. Let me also just take a step back before diving into the developments of this week, these last days, just to consider how far we've come over these past 4 years, and also to think a little bit about where we might be going from here. When President Biden took office, the United States faced the worst public health crisis in more than a century. It faced the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and unprecedented breaches with allies and partners around the world. Our adversaries saw a historic opportunity to work together to challenge our interests, to challenge our global standing, to challenge the international system of rules and principles on which our security and prosperity depend. First time I had an opportunity to speak at length in this role, I laid out how we would work to leverage American diplomacy to safeguard and accelerate America's renewal, how we would reimagine and revitalize our greatest strategic asset, our unmatched network of allies and partners, to deliver on issues that actually matter in the lives of our fellow citizens, matter in their livelihoods, matter in their futures, and to defend against increasingly assertive and aggressive revisionist authoritarian powers. And also how we modernize our own diplomacy to try to deliver on these priorities, to ensure that this department is ready to meet the tests of a more contested, a more complicated, a more combustible world. As President Biden emphasized when he was here on Monday, thanks to historic investments at home and around the world, the United States can now operate from a position of greater strength to tackle all of these challenges. Our adversaries and competitors are weaker. Our strategy of renewal to set the stage for America to win the fierce competition, to shape a new era of international affairs to the benefit of our people, the benefit of people around the world. And I think this week was another reminder, both of the power and the purpose of American leadership and American diplomacy. Over 15 months of devastating conflict between Israel and Hamas, we've worked to broker a deal that would bring hostages home, that would stop the fighting, that would surge humanitarian aid to people who so desperately need it, that would create the space to conclude a permanent ceasefire. We now have that, and we expect implementation of the agreement to begin on Sunday. As President Biden said yesterday, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. I want to thank our fellow mediators, Qatar and Egypt, for their extraordinary partnership. And I want to thank my colleagues, in particular, Jake Sullivan, Bill Burns, Brett McGurk, for their remarkable skill, tireless dedication over these many months of negotiation.
Will you recognize the Geneva Conventions apply to the Palestinians?
And again, I'm happy to address questions when we have a chance. I'm happy to address questions in a moment. Thank you. This is a moment of tremendous relief for Israelis and Palestinians alike. The daughter of one hostage spoke for many when she said, "I can't wait to see them come back to their families. I'm so desperate to see them." A mother of 5 displaced from Gaza City said simply, "We are being reborn." It's also a moment of historic possibility for the region and well beyond. It's going to take tremendous effort, political courage, compromise to realize that possibility, to try to ensure that the gains that have been achieved over the past 15 months at enormous, excruciating cost are actually enduring, to manage the still profound risks, to deliver on the promise of a more integrated Middle East. And simply put, to forge this reality, there are 2 immediate imperatives. First, to fully implement the ceasefire deal. And then second, to finalize a plan, an effective plan, as I spelled out earlier this week, that provides for Gaza's transitional governance, its security, its reconstruction, and that can make the halt in fighting endure. Delivering on these 2 priorities will in turn create the conditions for Israel and Saudi Arabia to normalize relations between them, which will require a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. On each of these imperatives, we've delivered concrete progress and we've laid a foundation for success, which we will hand over to the incoming administration. Together, they represent a historic opportunity to advance the long-term interests of the United States, our partners in the region, and around the Middle East. In Ukraine as well, we've seen the results of steadfast American leadership. We rallied and kept together some 50 countries to help Ukraine defend itself from Putin's war of aggression. Through Ukrainian courage and also Western resolve and firepower, Ukraine repelled Russia's invasion and took back half the territory it originally seized. We've marshaled commitments from countries around the world that will help Ukraine deter and defend against future attacks and stand on its own feet militarily, economically, democratically. We've also imposed the most ambitious sanctions and export controls ever on Russia, cutting off its biggest banks, reducing dramatically Europe's reliance on Russian energy, oil and gas, almost to zero at this point. As a result of some of our latest sanctions, Russian oil tankers are piling up along the Chinese coast, unable to offload. Ukraine will continue to stand as an independent, democratic nation anchored in the West with the freedom to choose its own future. If we sustain our support for Ukraine, if we continue to exacerbate Putin's growing manpower and economic dilemmas, we can continue to help Ukrainians gain leverage to negotiate a just and secure peace. Now, I got back from what was my 21st trip to the Indo-Pacific in this job just a short while ago, a region where the United States is now competing from a position of strength. We brought our regional allies together, our partners together, around a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific, where goods and ideas and people flow freely, where rules are applied fairly and transparently, where countries are free to choose both their own path and their own partners. We enhanced bilateral relationships with our core treaty allies, with Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines. We forged a new era of trilateral cooperation with Japan and Korea, with Japan and the Philippines as well. We re-energized the Quad with Japan, India, Australia, strengthened our relationships with ASEAN, the Pacific Island countries, elevated partnerships with Vietnam and Indonesia. As the DPRK and the PRC continue to fuel Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine, underscoring how European and Asian security are indivisible We've also built enduring bridges between our Pacific and Atlantic allies and partners. Australia, Japan, and South Korea have provided important support to Ukraine. In 2021, European allies were on the verge of signing a massive trade agreement with China. Now they're coordinating with us on everything from investment screening mechanisms to supply chain resilience to pushing back on China's overcapacity and unfair trade practices. At the same time, we've managed our competition with China responsibly so it doesn't veer into conflict, while also cooperating on challenges where the world expects great powers to lead and where it's clearly in the interest of the American people, from climate change to fentanyl. We've also demonstrated that other countries can rely on the United States to tackle some of our biggest shared challenges and deliver on some of our own on their own national aspirations, preventing disease outbreaks, enhancing food security, accelerating the clean energy transition, bringing together a global coalition of more than 160 countries to address the synthetic opioid crisis. As we celebrate the return of hostages in Gaza, including Americans, as we look to relief for the people of Gaza, I'm also thinking of all those U.S. citizens who are held wrongfully, who are hostage in countries around the world. I carried with me.
Miller says he doesn't know about the Hannibal directive.
You can leave, sir.
Again, I'm happy to address questions in a few more minutes. I look forward to answering questions in a few more minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let him answer some questions.
I look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Instead of making another speech every day.
Sir, would you like to be escorted out?
Go away.
You don't have the responsibility to tell me where to go. Do you want to be escorted out or not?
I want to
Thank you.
answer questions.
I look forward to answering questions in a minute.
I'm a
Thank you.
journalist. I'm not a potted plant.
Everyone will have an opportunity to ask a question in just a minute. Thank you.
Miller
So-
has explicitly told me he will not answer my questions. I'm justified in
So-
what I'm doing.
I have no greater pleasure in this job than crossing off a list I carry in my pocket, the names of those who had been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage, unjustly held hostage, and bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them to their loved ones. Finally, I just wanted to share this morning.
Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question.
I look forward to answering questions in a few minutes.
You know about Israel's nuclear weapons. Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asked.
Please, sir, respect the process. We'll have an opportunity to take questions in a few minutes.
Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please, sir, respect the process. Thank you.
Oh, respect the process. Respect this process. While everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal, why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague? Why aren't you in The Hague?
Finally, we've worked to modernize our diplomacy so that we're more agile, we're more effective, we're more prepared for the challenges of a new era. We've reorganized this department to lead on issues that increasingly animate our diplomacy, whether it's emerging technology, public health, strategic competition, economic statecraft. We've embraced new tools and approaches, from integrating data and AI into the work that we do, strengthening our capacity to anticipate, to plan for risks, as well as opportunities in this more volatile world. Maybe most important, we've invested in our people, improving our hiring and retention practices, diversifying our workforce, strengthening our training, providing more support to employees throughout their careers. We've hired the largest foreign service officer class in more than a decade, and we've grown our civil service corps at the fastest rate in more than 20 years. It was gratifying to me, and I think to everyone in this department, that among the first and last stops President Biden made in his tenure was right here at the State Department. I think that is powerful evidence of the trust that he placed in us to carry out this country's foreign policy. Our diplomats represent this country with exceptional skill, with professionalism, with heart. They often do so at great personal sacrifice, little fanfare, in some of the world's most challenging environments. It has been, simply put, the greatest of honors to be able to work shoulder to shoulder with them. These past 4 years, there have also been moments of disappointment, of hardship, of heartbreak. But I leave this job knowing that we spent every day thinking about and working toward what we believe is best for our people, the citizens we have the immense privilege of representing. And I'm confident we leave office with our country and with this department in a much stronger position than we found it. Now, with that, one last time, I look forward to taking some questions. Mr. Miller.
Matt, let's start off.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for the very opening comments about the work, the cooperation with us, the press corps. Even when we haven't always been satisfied or with the answers, we do certainly appreciate your willingness to engage with us, and so thank you for that. I want to start. Actually, I only have one question. Exactly 16 years ago today, January 16th, 2009, former outgoing Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice had her final press briefing here. And all of the questions she got were about Israel and Gaza. Every single one of them. And she said, we were working on an enduring ceasefire. She was about to sign an agreement with then Foreign Minister Livni that would move toward that way. She was working with international partners. Names have changed, but countries pretty much the same: Egypt, the Europeans, the Gulf Arab states. And so 16 years ago, we were in the same situation that we're in now, particularly because this ceasefire, current one, still seems to be in limbo. I'm wondering if you can point to any progress that has been made over the course of the Bush administration, the Obama administration. Has there been anything that has changed or given you hope? Because we're basically back in the same position we were 16 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. This is a long story. It's an enduring story. It's a story that is not likely to end anytime soon. And if you go back over the course of many administrations, not only Secretary Rice, but so many of our predecessors and so many of her successors, and now me, this is a story that we've been engaged in one way or another. And I think each of us has probably brought the conviction to it that we could and should do everything possible to try to get to and write a better conclusion, a good conclusion for the story. And so many of us for many years have labored to do just that. I think one of the lessons that we have to take away is that as resourceful and as powerful as we are, at the end of the day, we can't make decisions for others. They have to make them. They have to make hard choices. They have to take chances. We can do everything possible to push, to prod, to encourage, to support, but ultimately the decision lies with those most directly concerned. That's one thing. But the second thing is, and I believe this strongly, there's also no substitute for our engagement, for the efforts that we make in trying to move this forward and get to a better place. And yes, we have absolutely seen both progress and promise. And the question is whether leaders on all sides, but the people behind them, will find a way to seize on those opportunities. So, as I laid out in some detail just the other day, when we took office, we were very focused on pursuing greater integration in the region as the real answer to creating more security, more peace, more opportunity for people. Not trying to change individual countries, governments, societies, but bringing them closer together, And before October 7th, we'd done a lot of work on this integration, building on the Abraham Accords of the first Trump administration, pointing toward the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And as you all know, we were all planning to go to Saudi Arabia and Israel because we'd made so much progress on the normalization accords on October 10th, a trip that, of course, didn't happen, to do two things: to try to help finalize agreements that were necessary to get to normalization, and as part of that, to find a clearer way forward, a pathway to a Palestinian state, vital to Saudi Arabia, very important to us as well. Even with everything that's happened since October 7th, I believe strongly, including from my many conversations with leaders in the region, whether it's in Israel, in Saudi Arabia, or beyond, that the desire to pursue integration, the desire to bring countries together, remains strong, remains powerful, and can be a driving force for finally resolving some of these other questions, including the Palestinian question. Israel's deepest desire from day one of its founding was to be treated like any other country in the region, to have normal relations. And it's been demonstrated that that's possible and desired, but it requires, among other things, ending the conflict in Gaza, which we are now on the verge of doing as a result of everything that we have put into this, an agreement that President Biden put forward before the world in May, got the entire world to endorse. And in the months since, we've been working to negotiate the final details and get it implemented. And that's where we are now. So, end Gaza is one. And then, yes, a credible pathway to a Palestinian state is two. And leaders will have to summon the vision and the courage to do that. I laid out some ideas for how you can get there just the other day, but I believe that is possible. I believe the driving desire for integration is something that can carry this forward. Finally, I'll say this. We've also seen, as a result of so much of the work that we've done, what the possibilities are. For Israel, when it was attacked in an unprecedented way by Iran, a direct attack with hundreds of missiles, hundreds of drones. Not only did we come to Israel's active defense for the first time ever, we brought other countries along to do that, including countries in the region. And Israel now sees powerfully what it stands to gain from greater integration in the region, including in a common security architecture. All can see that this is a way to effectively isolate the troublemaker in the region, Iran. So all of that is there. All of that is possible. And I think for the incoming administration, it'll be important to continue to show, here's one path and what can be achieved by following that path. And then there's another, which is perpetual violence, destruction, terrorism, despair for people. That's the choice. I think we've now put in place and done the work that handing it off can be used to build a strong foundation and move down that much more positive path.
Leon.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary. Thank you for your service. Thank you for doing this. I trust you're not going to miss the million of miles that you've done in the last 4 years, and that you're happy to finally see your children. I wanted to ask you on Gaza, of course. You mentioned a tremendous relief in the region, both with Palestinians and Israel. There seems to be uncertainty for the ceasefire. And it was announced yesterday, and it's supposed to be implemented on Sunday. That's 4 days, quite a long time. Israel has led new strikes on Gaza today or overnight. How confident are you that this ceasefire is actually going to happen? And if I may, just a broader question, or after the 4 years, or your 4 years, and now that your tenure is coming up, what is your proudest accomplishment in these 4 years, and what is your biggest disappointment?
So on the ceasefire, yes, I am confident, and I fully expect that implementation will begin, as we said, on Sunday. Look, it's not exactly surprising that in a process and a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught, you may get a loose end. We're tying up that loose end as we speak. I've been on the phone in one way or another all morning with Brett McGurk, with our Qatari friends, and I'm very confident that this is moving forward, and we'll see the start of implementation of the agreement on Sunday. In terms of my own tenure and what I take from it, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunity to reflect on that in the weeks and months ahead. Look, in terms of satisfaction, as I said at the outset, we came in knowing that we had to reset the foundation for American diplomacy and American foreign policy. And resetting that foundation meant, as I've said, re-engaging, rejuvenating, reimagining these alliances and partnerships. It's the greatest strength that we bring to virtually every issue we have to tackle around the world. These voluntary partnerships and alliances that have stood us in such good stead over so many years, and I think are vital to effectively operating in this more complicated, this more contested, this more combustible world. And that's exactly what we did. But the point is not doing that for the sake of doing it. The point is doing it for the sake of more effectively dealing with the world we're operating in. And I think we've demonstrated that. When Ukraine was attacked by Russia, because of the investments that we've made in our partnerships and our alliances, we were able to bring together 50 countries, keep them together, and marshal their focus and their resources on helping to defend Ukraine. And we've done that very successfully. And we've done that in a way where many other countries picked up the burden. When it comes to maybe the biggest systemic challenge that we face in the international system, and that is China and the capacity that it has uniquely, whether it's militarily, whether it's economically, whether it's diplomatically, to reshape the international order, what we've been able to do through these stronger alliances and partnerships is to focus other countries in ways that we haven't seen before on how to deal effectively with the challenges posed by China. We have much greater convergence between us and partners in Europe, between us and partners in Asia, among all of us in confronting these challenges. And I listed a few areas in which we're working much more closely together. And as I've said before, when you bring just the United States to the table, well, we have a lot of weight, but when it comes to economic issues, for example, where China's engaged in unfair practices, where it's engaged in overcapacity to try to drown our industries, our communities, our workers with their products. Well, when we're taking that on and we're doing it alone, we're 20% of world GDP. When we're doing that in concert with allies and partners across Europe and Asia who are similarly aggrieved by these practices, well, we're 50, 60% of world GDP, and it's a lot more effective in getting China to change its conduct. So those are just two ways in which we've used this investment in our allies and partners to get real results, to tackle real problems, to meet real challenges. And again, through so many of the issues that are affecting the lives of our people, we brought countries together in a way that's going to have a material impact on making things better. I mentioned earlier the coalition we built on synthetic opioids, on fentanyl. You've heard me say this before. The number one killer of Americans aged 18 to 45 is fentanyl. And it's by definition a problem that has to be tackled cooperatively with other countries, because the ingredients that go into making it may be made halfway around the world. They come close to our borders. They get synthesized into fentanyl. They come into the United States. They kill people. So the fact that we brought all of these countries together, now working in close concert to deal with this problem, that's going to have a material benefit on the lives of the American people. In these ways and so many more, what I take satisfaction is that we now can approach each of these problems from a position of much greater strength, much greater effectiveness. Disappointments? Yeah, of course. There are always many. There's always the